So hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Wellbeing Wire podcast. Today I'm really excited to be joined by two people from the artistic world. We're going to be talking about we're going to exploring the question of how can creative expression support well-being? How can creative expression support well-being? Now today I'm joined by Dave Bowden from Word Guerilla, and I'm also joined by Honorata Artlysing. So Honorata, can you just give us a quick introduction? Can you quickly just tell my audience who you are?
Okay, hello and welcome. Thank you for having me here. So I'm Honorata. I'm creative counsellor, therapeutic arts practitioner, and expressive artist.
Thank you, Honorata. And Dave, who are you?
Hi, I'm Dave. I also known as the Word Guerilla. Thinking and writing is my fighting, and I essentially help people to use words and language to be creative, and for them to feel better, and in that be more productive.
Nice one. Thank you, Dave. So thanks to both of you for coming to discuss this today. I think this is it's a really interesting subject. I've got to admit, I'm the least artistic person you'll ever come across. I can't draw, can't anything. I've seen, Dave, you've wowed me with the things you can do. I can only dream of being that creative. On an art, when I looked at some of your paintings and the things that you've done, again, I can draw a house. You know, like the little sticks, that square. I can draw that. That's as far as my creative talents go. But I would love to be more creative, and I'd love to know more about how this can help people in terms of their well-being, because you're both from a perspective of working with young people as well. Can you just give us an example of how sort of change you've seen in a young person or even an adult through creative expression? Honorata, have you got an example?
Yes. So I think the best example would be like someone like you who says, "I can only draw a stickman." And they walk away with kind of being empowered to be able to say, okay, I can actually use my creative skills. And when I say creative skills, it doesn't mean you're going to walk away and draw like Leonardo da Vinci. It's about being confident and being free in whatever comes up from your creativity. And I think the most important ingredient which people tend to forget is experimentation. Being able to have ability to experiment without self-judgment. That's when we're talking about the power of creativity.
Okay, that's interesting then, because that takes back to school then. So I imagine, if I could recall rightly, in maths or anything at school, I used to get a lot of things wrong. I guess you were kind of berated for doing things a certain way, or you got it wrong. It wasn't a good thing to experiment. You had to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
So I guess this idea of stepping outside of the normal bounds, do a lot of people
Yeah.
struggle with that then, do they?
Yes, because I think there's a lot around the difference between fine arts and expressive arts. So expressive arts is built around your own ability to express yourself, whatever comes up. And that could be something that you don't even know you have in yourself. You have to discover it. So the self-judgment is kind of removed from the process, and it's a focus on the process, how you experience being creative, what happens in the process, not what comes out. That is a secondary kind of interest, but we have tendency to look at the outcome first. We have to shift from looking at the process and valuing the process, your experience, rather than the outcome.
Okay, so the point in the expressive art is actually the process. Whereas with the fine arts, it's about the end result. Is that correct?
Yeah, the process as well, because you need lots of technical skills. So that's more outcome kind of, it's about what it looks like. Expressive and creative arts gives you ability to focus on the process more and experience, and hence the linkage with the mental health.
Okay, so through expressive art, and with my stick drawing of a house, if I felt great doing that, I've achieved the purpose then. Whereas if I
Yeah,
took
if
it
that
to,
was your if that was your experience, that's what
okay,
matters.
but if I took it to the Tate Modern, they're not going to be taking it and exhibiting it then, because that would be more
Well,
fine
that's
arts.
where you move towards outcome.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dave. How about yourself? Then give us an example of someone you've worked with, or where you've witnessed someone experience some sort of transformation in their well-being through expression.
Yeah, so I remember running a session for teachers, um, and the training sessions that I was running was about developing subject knowledge, but it was mainly about utilizing the skills within writing for your own mental well-being. And at the end of the session, I had this one teacher come to me and say, I used to write when I was younger, And then I just stopped. And she said it was just so wonderful to have that moment to myself, just with the pen and the paper, to put my thoughts down, a really cathartic experience. I feel better for doing it. And you know, she explained to me that she was going to continue doing it, which is what you want, really. You know, as far as I'm concerned, everyone should be a writer. Bob, I want to go back to something else that you mentioned a minute ago about being in maths and how things is either kind of right or wrong. And I think therein lies the issue with outcomes, is saying, right, well, we've got to just get to the outcome. And actually, like, maths can be about playing as well and experimenting to find the potential outcome. It's great when you get the right answer, especially if it involves, you know, some money that you're gonna maybe make or something like that. But you know, I think we're always better off, and we're always more engaged when we're experimenting, when we're playing, essentially, and when we're placed within a state of flow. So as far as I'm concerned, and I want to say the psychologist's name who said, you know about the state of flow, don't you?
Csikszentmihalyi.
That's the one. You know, we're far better off, and we're far more productive if we're placed within this state of flow. And the more often that we can get there, the better. And often we're in that state when we're playing.
Okay, so let's dive into that then. Is it because what I know is, what are the ingredients? Clearly, this creative expression, artistic expression, helps people. The arts are life-changing for many people in whatever form that might be. What do we think are those ingredients then? Because a lot of people might be listening to this and say, well, arts, you know, it's a bit fluffy for me. It's a bit, you know, it's arty-farty. Yeah, it's a bit arty-farty. So let's break it down to some ingredients that someone who might be thinking this is arty-farty, how would we grab them? I tell you, let me reframe the question. Honorata, how would you persuade someone who thinks it's arty-farty to jump in on and get farty?
I would look into neuroscience of creativity and arts. You know, you're using the parts of the brain that we tend not to use in our modern world and the way we are living. So imagination, active imagination, the right side of the brain, working with abstract ideas, colors, innovation. This all happens in creative process of any subject. Doesn't have to be arts, any kind of, you know, in the science as well. All those elements are normally, the majority of those processes located in the right side of our brain. And by being involved in a creative process and being in a flow, we also create the bridge between left and right side of the brain. So we're using the capacity of our brain to the extended level compared to, you know, how we live daily. Look how we live. We wake up, look at the phone, tick, click, click, and the day is gone.
Yeah.
And the day is gone. And majority of our brain parts never been used in a day.
Okay.
By being in a creative flow, you become fully a human being by using what you've got.
Oh, that's really interesting. Become fully a human. So is it the fact that we're not, the way life and society set up?
We're not living fulfilling. Yeah, we're not living fulfilling life.
So as you're speaking now, I'm getting a visual in my mind of you're driving down in your car. What you're saying though is you're not just driving the car, you're opening the sunroof. You're letting the windows down, you're smelling the trees.
No, you put the wings on.
Yeah, you're putting the wings on, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That kind of, okay.
So you're thinking outside the boxes as well. You know, with anything creative, you are challenged to come out of your standard kind of box thinking, which very often happens in work environments, sadly. We are forced to behave and perform in a certain way, and you are forced to do something different. So we have people, when I work especially with adults, and they haven't done anything creative for, let's say, 30, 40 years, and they sit down and manage to engage, they're absolutely exhausted after that, but in a good way, because suddenly they are using those parts of brain that they completely forgot about. They're exhausted, but they're happy.
So let's say you've got a room full of engineers then. Let's say you've got a group of 50-year-old engineers haven't done anything creative for years. They're very process driven. That this could actually benefit those sort of people then, because it's actually expanding their mind in a way that their everyday tasks require, that don't require them to.
Yes, and then another layer to that, and that's more me from my therapist point of view talking, is the ability to build your resilience, your emotional resilience, if you're able to use your brain and creativity on a regular basis. You bounce back quicker.
Okay.
I think Honorata has a good point in that you know, a lot of jobs are so process driven. You know, even if you're in a creative industry, you find yourself having to do things that are not creative constantly. You know, to the point where you know, if that's all you're doing, then I question that you are reaching the levels of happiness that you can achieve. You know, and actually, if you're in a workplace where all you're doing is processes, then as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of like the duty of your employer for your own mental health and well-being to make sure that your mind is opened up to be as happy as it possibly can be, and provide you with other outlets. That's as far as I can see it. You know, because you're not going to get, you know, the mental nourishment. It's like, you know, if you only eat chips, you're going to get ill. So you need to eat some fruits and vegetables. And it's the same for the mind. Your mind needs different levels and forms of input, you know. And I think that's kind of for me, that's the biggest selling point of this, is that if you were to, you know, within a workplace, engage the people who are within an organization in creative processes, I guarantee, based on neuroscience, that they will be happier. Okay. And they will be more productive. And it might be that they're in, you know, they're in an environment where they don't necessarily need to necessarily innovate, because if you're within a process, you have to follow the process, you know. But they'll be happier doing it because their brain will have had that mental nourishment from whatever it might be, playing music or drawing or writing something, you know.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so I like the mental nourishment. I'm just noting down a few words you both mentioned, or phrases. Mental nourishment. I think Honorata, you said fully human a moment ago. So if you were to boil it down then to Barry's feeling a certain way. He engages in creative expression, whether it's through written word, spoken word, art, painting, working with clay, charcoal, and afterwards he feels better. If you were to pluck out the one thing that you think was the causative agent there to take him from feeling crap to feeling better, good, great, whatever it is, what one thing could you each of you pick out, do you think would be that causative agent?
For me, I would say, well, particularly with writing, this is the way that I feel about writing. It's the catharsis that you're given from it. It's that release, you know. So as an example, as a habit, every day I write for 10 minutes, and that's not because I want to produce, you know, a masterpiece or anything like that. I write because there's a lot going on in my brain, and that kind of essentially downloads my mental inbox and allows me to clear things. And in doing that, I then kind of find ideas and other stuff that interest me a little bit more, that I want to kind of explore. And you know, I think that's the most important thing, certainly from a writing point of view, because all writing's based around language. And we all have a kind of an internal dialogue that goes on in our head, whether we like it or not. There's chatter, and sometimes we don't want that chatter, and it's a really great way to release that chatter, you know. So that's probably why. Was it Barry who we were talking?
It was Barry.
That's probably why Barry now sat down for 30 minutes with his pad and his pen, and he wrote for 10 minutes, just like writing freely, and, you know, realized he wrote about Led Zeppelin and really liked Led Zeppelin, so wrote a poem about Led Zeppelin, and now he's like, oh yeah, I like Led Zeppelin, I'm going to listen to them, I'm feeling good, and now I can go about my job for the rest of the day, you know. So catharsis, okay. the catharsis that you get from it, that for me the main thing, and we all need that. We all need a release, a valve, and I think creativity brings that.
Okay, so Dave, your perspective, that causative agent could be the catharsis, the release. How about yourself, Honorata? What would you say would
I
be
agree
that
with
one?
David. That is very, powerful. I would add, from my own perspective, is the ownership and freedom.
Okay.
So creativity gives you ability to, you create what you want, how you want it. You are the master. And how often in our life we are able to create something from scratch when we have the ownership of, total freedom. And if one of your top values is freedom, and for many creative people it is, having the avenue of that release, expression, and doing things the way you do it, it's fully personal. You have that full ownership. There are no barriers. Having that kind of freedom in life when we're so often restricted can be powerful.
Okay, so freedom, and I think it's interesting that we mentioned this. Okay, so the freedom, like you said, Honorata, how often do you have complete freedom to just do whatever you want to do? And maybe even for young people, when we're younger, because I know you both work with young people a lot, we're quite constricted. Your parents give you money, they tell you when you can go out, when you go to bed, when to eat. So I guess the idea of complete freedom would be quite liberating for someone who lives a quite restricted life.
I want to add to what she's just said there about this idea of freedom, and then you mentioned, well, when you're younger, you potentially you long for this freedom, but there is kind of, as a young person, there is this you don't have as many barriers up, really, do you? But unfortunately, the systems that, certainly the system of education, is one that's process driven, and as a result of that, we're told that we need to do things to follow processes. So if I'm writing with young people, for example, they'll very much often say, "Is this how you want me to do it? Is this how you want me to do it?" And I'm like, "No, I want you to do it how you want to do it." And it's kind of, it's almost, being creative is often against what we're taught when we're
against
younger.
The mainstream. Yeah, it's against the mainstream.
And what we're taught when we are in the working world. So it's really important to have that freedom, for all of us, for humanity. It's important to have that freedom,
so not just for Barry, and for humanity.
No, not just for Barry, and particularly for younger people, to kind of go, oh yeah, actually I can have freedom, and I can find it within the artistic world.
Okay, so that ties in quite interesting to something that, Honorata, you were talking about before we came on air, and it's this idea of fear. So we're brought up in these quite constricted environments where you're told, like Dave just mentioned, that he said someone to have a go at someone, they said, "How do you want me to do it?" So clearly there's a fear of just trusting ourselves to do something. So let's say you've got Barry, the engineer from Leeds, he sat at home, and he believes he may be able to benefit from this. Where does he start? If he fears that I'm an engineer, I follow process, but you're telling me to just innovate and just make it up myself, I can't do that. I haven't done that. I've never done that. So where would you get someone like that to start, Honorata?
I actually met someone like Barry. That's reminded me. It was man in his middle 50 something. Like you said, worked in a very well, maybe I think it was more banking, financial kind of environment, and wanted to do something creative, didn't have a clue where to start. And we started with a little sketchbook, very small. And I introduced him to what's called automatic drawing, sometimes called unconscious drawing. And this is basically where you close your eyes to create a scribble on the page. So this is where you already not detaching from outcome, because you can't see what you're drawing. So it's not like I'm going to draw an elephant. You draw with closed eyes. You open your eyes and you keep turning that page in little sketchbook and start inventing things from the shapes. So you don't know what they're going to be. You're not pre-planning. You're just in that flow of spontaneous action. And it was interesting with this gentleman, because he started like that, and then we moved to watercolors, doing stains with colors and still inventing shapes. And it just evolved, and he had lots of sketchbooks he brought to me months later with lots of imagination-based drawings. And that was his little world that kept him happy.
Right. So there was long-term benefit for him then.
Yes, he still keeps sketchbooks, and it was very interesting to listen to him. Like, he detached himself from creativity from very young age when he went to work into financial environment that wasn't nourished there. There's no need for that, but there was a need in him.
Right. So just before I ask Dave then about that, what you just said, detached himself from creativity. Do you think that that is a problem that we have in society, that we get to a certain age and maybe we're detached from imagination and creativity at a certain point? What do you think, Honorata?
David.
I was just going to say, if you're Honorata, do you think there is a point where
Yeah,
that does happen?
we do, because playfulness seems to be having best before date on it.
Right, okay. There's a sell-by date on it.
Society, it does. So, once we hit teens, don't behave childish.
Yeah.
Don't do this, don't, that's silly. Then we have a period, if some people, when they become parents, they may reconnect when they have children and toddlers, but again, just for that period of time, but from position of the parents, so more controlling position. And playfulness, when you look at the animals, they're able to play till they're very old.
Yeah, I can see that. I was playing with my...
are disconnecting from playfulness, creativity, and ability to just do things for the sake of doing and being, not to create the outcome. So yes, there's detachment, definitely.
Right, that's interesting. So yeah, just getting back to the idea of doing things inherent just for the inherent pleasure of them rather than for an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where would you start with someone, Dave? You sat down with Barry from Leeds. He's heard all about this creative expression through words and stuff like that. The only words he really comes across each day are engineering manuals. So how are you going to get Dave from Leeds started?
I think
Barry
what
from Leeds.
Honorata, Barry. I'm really pleased I'm working with Barry. He needs my time. So, but I think Honorata noted a word that for me is the most important thing about kind of getting started, and that is spontaneity. And anytime I work with people, I very often, the first thing I do is I play a game. Well, it's not really a game. Well, there's no outcome, there's no winner. I think that's the great thing of it. But it's playing. It's called the shape game. And it comes from a book by Anthony Brown. Well, that's where I found it, about this boy goes to a museum and he buys a pad and a pen, and on the way back home, he plays the shape game, which is essentially one person draws a shape and the other person turns it into a shape. And I defy anyone to not enjoy that, because you do. It's fun. And that kind of almost greases the wheels of spontaneity. So from my point of view, if I'm coming at the point of view of writing creatively, I always start with doodling, because it's a kind of really easy way in. Like, it seems like everybody, it's just moving your hand. We start with this shape game, and then we often just kind of draw free. I use music, so we draw free to music. When I say drawing free, it's like you take your pen for a walk around the page, So you play the shape game, take your pen for a walk around the page, and then the important thing is bringing what is within your consciousness onto that page. So, like, any ideas, any words, or any thoughts, starting knowing them down. For some reason, when I ever talk about this or think about this, I think of Cocoa Pops. So Cocoa Pops gets written down on the page, and we just start to fill the page with words and ideas. And that is essentially, we're essentially playing with it. And then it's kind of like the way in. Once we've got that, we start to develop that a little bit more, and maybe like write sentences, but they're all from just consciousness about what's on your mind. And it could be things where, it's like an association. So I might say something like, don't think about love. And in me saying don't think about love, I don't know, like, for some reason I've just thought of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Because
Brian Adams.
I'll write Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Kevin Costner. And you just kind of like, it's like really kind of fundamental, basic stuff to just get like the wheels of creativity greased. And once you start that process, once you start putting pen to paper or brush to paper or whatever it is, you kind of open it up. You realize that you can do it, and very, very quickly you see the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And for David said, I think they're just going to quickly pick up on that. This is so important to maintain that connection, to And when I say maintain connection, doing small things on a regular basis. So you don't have to sit for 10 hours and create a massive book or massive painting. It's not about that. If it becomes your habit, that you give yourself time and permission to be creative for, let's say, 10 minutes a day. It's not a lot, 10 minutes a day to do that little, maybe free associations writing or doodling, whatever you want. You will start noticing, you start craving for more. It's like muscles. You start, it's the same process. The more you stay connected, the more you want to create. It just kind of awakes in you.
So the doodling or the getting started, that's like the gateway drug to the creative expression. Then that gets you started.
It's the gateway drug. Yeah.
And many people kind of disconnect because they have this preconception, oh, I don't have 10 hours, in a week to do math, so I won't do anything. And then 20 years gone by, and they're like, well, I had never done anything.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that as well with like the time, because earlier you mentioned about we wake up and we get on our phone and click, click, click. Like, God, look at the time you spent doing that. Man, I get guilty of that as well. And if you just said, right, rather than doing that for 10 minutes, I'm going to just scribble some nonsense and some doodling, and I think for me, doodling is one of the most powerful things, and that can be. I mean, I like doodling patterns. I mean, in particular, I like doodling on important documents in my house. That's the most. That's the most fun thing. But I think it's that kind of it embraces that kind of rebellious, like for me, doodling, that rebellious spirit. When you had in school, and it's like, you can't doodle in your maths book. Well, I will then. It's that kind of childlike state that you are regressed back to, which is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I guess with that as well, if you think about we're talking about social media, we spend a lot of time on doing these sort of things. You've got TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all these things. They're very passive. You're not really doing anything, are you, apart from scrolling? So I guess the parts of the mind that are maybe engaged while you're doing that are completely different to those that are engaged in the creative process. So one might be nourishing the mind, and one is making us probably that little bit less intelligent, should we say.
Yeah, so there's also the danger of looking at social media and looking at people's achievements in beautiful writing, poems or artwork, and thinking I'm not good enough, and that will never make you start. So sometimes I talk to people, they're like, I watched 100 art videos, but I have not created a single doodle. There's social media and the internet use a massive learning base, but let's use it as learning rather than intimidating tool that stops us. It's great to be inspired, but you have to, inspiration finds you working.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That does make sense, I guess, because it is easy to look at. I could look at, say, your art on Honorata and think, there's no way I'm going to do that, so I'm just not going to start, because if anyone sees it, it's going to look rubbish. So I can see that. What I wanted to touch on next was, there's a lot of, this thing about talking about, when we've got something we're struggling with, talking about it, sharing it with someone. A lot of people might feel a bit of shame about something they won't want to talk about. But where do you think what place do you think role does creative expression play in terms of someone not wanting to share it with anyone else, but being able to get it out with themselves, knowing that no one else will see that? What difference do you think that makes for someone when they know that it's just them and their doodles or their paintings or their clay work? What sort of difference do you think that makes on Honorata?
Massive. I mean, I do therapy, one-to-one creative therapy, and this stuff doesn't go anywhere. It stays with clients. It may stay in a therapy room forever, whatever they want to do with it. Clay may go back to the garden. Creations may be buried again in soil. And I work a lot with, when Dave mentioned doodling on documents, I work a lot in textbooks, converting them into art books, but not art books like cutouts. It's just basically smashing paint and drawing into textbooks. And again, that stuff is not shared, and it's very powerful because not everything is a canvas that needs to go on the wall. There's stuff that is personal, that stays with you. And because it's personal, that kind of, heavy sense of external approval is removed. Nobody is going to be looking at that and judging it. It's a very different personal process. So from therapeutic point of view, thing is even more, you know, if I had the choice, someone would say, I want to create for sharing, or I want to create for myself, and they had to make that choice, which they don't have to, but I would go for creating for yourself, be probably more therapeutic for that person.
Okay. So yeah, so it's, yeah, because I think that's the thing is it would be seem so much easier if I've got something internal that I want to deal with, or I need to deal with, but the idea I've got to go and speak to a counsellor might be a hurdle too far. But if I've got to get it down on paper for myself, just getting the words out there, I guess that's starting the process, isn't it? What would you say to that, Dave? What would you say about the idea that when you're doing it on your own, that there might be a difference in how much you're willing to express versus in front of another person?
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's an example. My wife the other week said to me, "You haven't been writing much." I said, "I have. I just haven't shared it with you." You know, because essentially, it wasn't for her; it was for me. And I write to share with people, but I probably write more to share with the page. You know, I'm going to save your audience £50. If you go to a counsellor, the counsellor will probably say journal, start writing your thoughts and your feelings down. And that's because we need that process. We need to get it out, you know. But often what we don't want to do, because it's either maybe we're embarrassed or it's too painful, or we certainly can't share it with other people because it might upset them. You know, we often don't share things. But you know, if you've got some sort of artistic output, then you know it's a really great way to get all of those things that are really personal off your chest that no one's gonna actually see, you know.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is so I've sometimes like written things that I didn't want anyone to see, but I needed to kind of get them out of me, and then I've like made them in paper airplanes and like flown them, and then like or burnt them. or one time I wrote something on a bit of paper and I ate it. I thought that's a funny thing to do.
Process.
You know,
And it's really really symbolic. Or I've written something and buried it, like no one else is going to ever see it. It's rotten now.
So
you
you're
know,
taking
and
that
that's
nourishment
like
to be literal rather than figurative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you know, that's like it's a really powerful thing to have that is completely free.
Yeah.
You know,
and yours,
completely free.
yeah,
And yours, yeah. You have ownership over how you decide to, let go of that. Whatever's with inside you that actually needs to be taken away from you.
Okay, so we've got complete ownership, like Honorata said, of not only the creative process but also of what happens with the end product as well. Which I guess when we share something with another person, we can't be completely sure of what will happen with that information next, unless we're with a counsellor who has sworn an oath of secrecy. But a friend might not. So I guess there is that security in knowing this is what I've come up with and I've expressed. This is where it's going to stay. I've either eaten it, burnt it, or made it into a paper airplane, or left it in my journal.
Yeah.
What about then? Do you think is it when we're feeling better, we're opening up these other parts of the mind, we're feeling better, doing something that makes us feel good? That's temporarily erases any negative feelings. Or, I don't like the word negative feelings. Sorry, uncomfortable feelings, should I say? Or do you think we're touching on something deeper that's more transformative? So I guess is this helping us a temporary therapy, or actually changing ourselves at a deeper level? What would you say to that, Honorata?
There are two layers of that. Both those processes you mentioned, but they unfortunately get muddled up sometimes. So I'm a big supporter of the idea that art used and any creativity used deeply allows you to process things and connect with unconscious and process and heal. However, there's a big, massive, again, movement at the moment around using creativity as distraction, but distraction in kind of semi-good way. So you're kind of putting on hold stuff that's uncomfortable because you engage into something creative. There's nothing wrong with that. However, it does make the whole concept of therapeutic use of creativity a little bit flat, and creates interpretation of that creativity is just, opening up gratitude journal, jotting down 3 things, job done, or doing coloring books, which is not really, that's just that kind of bottom layer. And we have that deeper layer where you actually connect with your own feelings, and you're able to connect with things that are not fully conscious, where you just kind of suppress certain things. So it's up to each person how they want to use creativity, because if they're in the need of using it as distraction, especially with very high anxiety, it can become handy. Let's say someone's very anxious to be on a bus and they start doodling, and that helps them to survive the bus journey.
Yeah. Okay.
That is handy tool. That is very handy tool, but that's not everything you can do with creativity and arts.
Okay, so it can, what you're talking about, working on multiple levels, because maybe some people listening might think this make me feel good, do a bit of doodling for half an hour, feel better, but then tomorrow I'll feel back where I was. But you're saying there could be transformative, there can be transformative aspects to this as well. Okay.
Yeah, there's a few different levels you can use that, like with food. We have desserts that we eat not for nourishment but more for taste.
Yes.
And we have food that we need to eat because it nourishes our body.
That's a good way of looking at it. It's a very creative way of looking at it, Honorata.
Yeah, like compare things from different levels.
Dave, how about you? What would you say? What do you think about the way it can work at various levels? Do you think, is it making us temporarily feel good, or do you think, like Honorata said, it works at multiple levels?
I think it does work at multiple levels. I'm gonna join in with a bit of food, and the dessert, the sweet, which we don't necessarily need a sweet. I like a peanut butter Kit Kat. I don't need a peanut butter Kit Kat, but it makes me feel great when I have one. It's delicious, And a moment ago, and Honorata mentioned, jotting down 3 things that were good. So as a practice, as a habit, this is something that I do every day, and on a really simple level, it is like it's a peanut butter Kit Kat. That's everything's like in that moment is kind of much nicer. But when it becomes habitual and you do it every day, you start to kind of realize, that the things that are really positive are kind of really outweighing things that are negative. So it's kind of almost remapping. Well, I feel like it's over the course of how many years has remapped my brain essentially. But yeah, I also feel that the process that you can use can be really transformative, like particularly from my point of view of writing. Sometimes the way we feel about certain things is really difficult to understand, is really, really difficult to articulate, but actually putting those thoughts down on a piece of paper helps you to process them, like particularly grief. I think for me, understanding grief and processing grief, writing has been absolutely integral to that. So it's allowed me to understand it and to process it and to move forward and adapt with grief in my life in a positive way. Does that make sense, Jonathan?
Yeah, it does. And actually, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about that term neuroplasticity, how the brain changes based on what you think, feel, and experience through life. So I can see, you persuaded me both on about these levels where we can be changing, not just feeling better in the moment or temporarily, but actually your mind changing based on the way you use the pen, the way you use clay, those tactile experiences, the things that you think. So getting Barry from Leeds out of his old patterns of thinking as well.
It's tools. They're essentially, if you have, creative mediums, then I really do believe that they're tools for you to kind of negotiate your thoughts and feelings and emotions to create positive outcomes for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could say that over the years I've learned a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy, and I found that ABC method just before bed and a bit of gratitude, those things, forcing my mind to think about those things that have gone well in my life, actually puts you in a better frame of mind to go to sleep, so you wake up feeling better. But the CBT angle, writing things down, I've seen perspectives on things that I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't written them down. So I can definitely see how these processes they're expansive in the mind. I think we're quite narrow in our thinking a lot of the time. These things we're talking about expand the mind. Now, I'm just conscious of time. So before we go, I'm going to put you both on the spot. You've persuaded me about the need for creative expression in life in general, but you know, we focus on the working world here, but let's think in life in general. You're at a conference, you're the keynote speaker, you've got 30 seconds left of your speech, and you're talking to all of the leaders from the biggest organizations around the world, and you want to persuade them to introduce why they should introduce creative expression in the workplace. What would you say? Who would like to go first?
As long as I'm getting Barry involved, that's the main thing.
You've got 30 seconds, Dave. What would you say? What would you say to the audience?
I would say, you know, if you're looking like, if you want these, you're trying to engage leaders to get them to get their employees or people within their organization to be involved in this. I would kind of argue the fact that if you're a leader of an organization, then you want the best for people. You want them to be the best that they can be. And without creativity, they will not be the best that they can be. Not only in terms of their own person and who they are, who they identify as, but also in terms of their level of productivity.
Thank you.
And if they want productivity, they need to get their staff to be creative.
Nice one, Dave. Thank you. And Honorata, what would you say in your 30 seconds to this audience of 10,000 influential leaders of business?
Trying to imagine. Well, I would just say if you want your people to work in a way that brings development and innovation, and that is the way to go forward, then they need to be creative. Simple as that.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you both for your time. This has been really interesting. You've definitely persuaded me. I mean, some of the things you've mentioned about, you know, mental nourishment and that being fully human. A lot of these things, they feel inspired, they feel good, and it's making me want to go and try these things out. So, for anyone who's listening, who's hopefully also been inspired by you both, where can they find out more about you and your work? So, Honorata, where can people find out about you and what you do?
So probably social media, which I just criticized. So on social media, I'm function under the Honorata Artlysing, the same for the Instagram. So I'm easy to be found, I suppose.
Brilliant, thank you. And Dave, Mr. Word Guerilla, where can people find out about you and what you do?
So they can go to www.wordguerilla.com or basically every social media that's ever lived, because I am also on that. However, what I will say about that is I use it as a creative platform. You know, it's kind of another element of creativity. And my name is Word Guerilla. It's not gorilla as in you know, King Kong. It's Guerilla as in guerrilla fighter. Guerrilla. Yes, you find me there, www.wordguerilla.com and all your favorite social media sites.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Honorata. So everyone, hopefully you found this a really interesting episode. Hopefully you found it as inspiring as I have. Check out both Honorata and Dave on their socials. And hopefully I'll have them back on a near point in the future as well to maybe expand further on these ideas around art and how it can help support or improve on well-being. Thanks for listening, everyone. Dave, Honorata, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.